Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back to Prime Live. Up next, we have a very interesting conversation with Brendon Petersen, and we will be speaking about the future of work for South Africa's youth. Now, we will be discussing the promising potential of the digital economy of South Africa's youth as we explore the challenges of youth unemployment in South Africa. Brendon will also share his expertise on how emerging technologies in the digital economy can create flexible and inclusive earning opportunities for young people. Thank you so much for joining us, Brendon. Welcome to Prime Life and good evening.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Thank you so much. Now, when we think about the digital economy, what are some specific opportunities that young people can explore today?
I think it's such an interesting question that a lot of people expect, there to be very specific answers to. I think there definitely are huge opportunities, in areas like e-commerce, app development, a lot of digital spaces, digital marketing, content creation, things like that. And we've seen a lot of people move into those spaces. I think when we talk about e-commerce, for example, we're talking about, selling both locally and globally. And we've seen these sort of opportunities arise, with so many different platforms, not just like your Amazons, but, your TikToks, your social media platforms, obviously app development can be anything from fintech to edtech. When we talk content creation, people automatically just think, oh, let me be an influencer, let me do this. But, you can do digital content creation on YouTube, streaming, you can do podcasts, remote services are huge worldwide right now. Virtual assistants, digital marketing, all of those sort of things. And I think what makes those great options are, we talk about South Africa where, yes, there is still a huge digital literacy gap, but for the people who have the access, and, I think as we look at things, the sort of barrier to entry, the cost of access, whether it's a smartphone that's good enough, internet that's good enough, and access to platforms is slowly dropping. So I think it makes those options a lot more viable and a lot more attractive. And really, you need to be looking at how do you solve problems for the community that you're in, because usually, if you have an issue or a problem that needs to be solved, there are other people that need that problem to be solved. And why not you? Why not use the expertise that you have, the lived experience you have, to help, a community, but also to build something viable to sustain yourself, your family, and maybe even your community.
Hmm. Most definitely. And how do having these, digital skills that we're talking about, or roles in the digital industry be lucrative even on a global scale? Because I think a lot of people maybe are thinking that when we're speaking about digital works or, things that they can do online, it's only referring to South Africa. But we live in a world where, because of the digital world that we live in, it allows you to also explore opportunities also, across the globe. So can we please touch on that?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it was last year I was in Durban with a company called CIPC. Most people will know them as a contact center, as a customer service, but they've got so many different divisions. And one of the divisions that, I got to see was sort of like a remote work kind of thing where, you could be an app developer, for example, living in anywhere in South Africa, so long as you have internet access, and a computer, but you could be developing for, a multinational that's based in Switzerland, New York, Zurich, all different parts of the world. And I literally saw people sitting at desks who that's what they were doing, taking those skills and taking them globally, but able to do it from a place like Durban, able to do it from, anywhere in South Africa. So, there's a lot of this opportunity online that I don't think we think of because we think of these geographic limitations. And if you look at companies like Amazon and those coming to South Africa, that's another opportunity to take your skills, grow it on a global scale. So I think there's a lot more, and I think unfortunately, myself included, I think sometimes we're so used to the limitations of geography that we don't necessarily see the fact that there is more opportunity. And, South Africans have a great work ethic reputation worldwide. And I think that that is something that counts for a lot. And more people are looking towards South Africa, not just for cost savings, but because we have the skills.
Hmm. And do you believe that maybe there are certain sectors or industries within the digital economy that are particularly promising for the youth of South Africa? If yes, can you please name a few?
Yeah, I think there are quite a few. I think, understandably, and we've had this conversation many times, but I think it is still a valuable conversation to keep having. People are concerned about AI, and I completely understand where that concern comes from. but there's a lot of spaces where AI just isn't going to be viable, whether it's now or even in the future. If you look at countries like China, for example, where we look at China as this very tech-forward country, which it is, there's been, I wouldn't say a mandate, but there's been suggestion, I think, shall we say, from the government that people should look into working with their hands, doing some almost artisan kind of work, because how do you get AI to do that? And I think the more the world turns digital, yes, there is going to be more opportunity, but I think that also then creates, a sort of counterpoint and a counterbalance that is needed, where we are going to need more of that sort of, work with your hands, artisan work, and there's no shame in that. So I think there's that as an opportunity, but I also think fintech. I mean, South Africa continues to be one of the leading countries for fintech worldwide. Just banking sector. If you look at things like the way we use mobile first, that really does put us ahead of so many other countries. So fintech is a massive, massive sector. So digital wallets, mobile payments, all of those sort of things. Agri-tech and food tech. So looking at that, we'll be solving supply chain issues. Food issues, food security, health tech. Again, we're at the forefront of health in many ways. So telemedicine, health apps, diagnostics. There was and this is a rumor, we don't know if it's true or not, but I saw an article earlier today saying that it's rumored that Huawei might be bringing, a glucose monitoring sort of system to some devices next year. Whether that's true or not, we don't know, but we know that Apple just brought something, like that to the market. So the odds are the rest of the industries going to pivot towards that, and it's a segment of the industry where I think South Africa has a lot to contribute. So if you are interested in health, if you are creative or digital media, again, we continue to be towards the top of the world when it comes to animation, gaming, streaming, all of these things, and all of these things are able to scale globally. And if you're worried about, oh, I'm interested, but I don't have the skills, I don't have the money, there's lots of companies. We spoke about it more than once. Amazon Web Services, for example, has a digital skills center in Cape Town where you can go do lessons free of charge. You get upskilled, they help you find a job, and they're not the only ones. So there are more and more places springing up where you can take that passion and actually find the discipline and discipline in terms of which line of work you want to go into and get the skills and then still find a job. So I think those are definitely places that people need to be looking at.
Mm. Most definitely. Now, we've also seen a significant trend, towards the remote work and digital freelancing,
Mm.
especially during the wake of COVID-19 pandemic. And I want to know how South African people can leverage these trends to secure employment, such as like what skills do you think they need to focus on? Because I don't think this is something that anyone can just wake up and decide they're going to do. They obviously need to upskill themselves. And, so I want us to share with them exactly what skills they need to learn so that they can be able to be employable online.
This is such an interesting question because the obvious answer is obviously you need some form of digital literacy skills, and people think I need to be a whiz at computers or database or whatever. A lot of those skills can be taught. I think what really you need to start with is not just the willing attitude of wanting to learn and be open to learn, because I think it can be very challenging, and I will definitely include myself in this. When you're being put in a situation, you want to do something, but it's like, I just don't know. And I think there's a fear that's associated with that that brings a bit of shame with, I don't know, and I don't want to embarrass myself by saying I don't know because I'm sure other people do. I think that needs to change with all of us, again, myself included. But I also think there's a lot of basics that are missing from these things. And when I say basics, I mean people skills. How do you speak to people? Because when you go to an interview, that's what's going to secure you the job. Yes, you are going to need the skills, but if you have a willingness to learn, there are places who will be like, you know what, let's give this person a chance, or let's get them into a training program. So I think those basic people skills are where you need to start. Don't let your background be the thing that limits you. I was having this conversation with an Uber driver the other day, and I think people are always very surprised to find out that my background comes from, not a wealthy family at all. We're getting to do these things. Like right now, I'm speaking to you guys from Paris. This was never something that I could ever have dreamed could be a part of what I get to do as my career every day. Being on TV, being on radio, having a platform that I've built, and ultimately being able to reach almost 19 million people. All my platforms combined. That's not a thing that I could ever have thought of that I could do. but it was that willingness to learn and those people skills that I think, sort of really helped propel me towards that and saying, I don't know how to do this. I
Mm,
might make a fool of myself, but let me give it a shot. Let me learn and
mm.
let me see what I can take from this to move myself forward.
Most definitely. And on a global scale, are there maybe any certificates that you know of that people can pursue, or any languages that are popular that might assist, the people that are looking for jobs on a global scale?
I mean, this is an interesting one because in terms of certifications, the world is digital. So, again, I mentioned that AWS Skill Center in Cape Town. I'm really hoping that they're going to open more, but that will definitely get you certified in the tech space. And obviously, Amazon Web Services continues to be one of the biggest on the planet. So that definitely opens doors, and that is a globally sort of recognized certification. But also, companies like Cisco are also doing things like that as well, where they will upskill you and train you. I'm not exactly sure what the certification is over there, but again, Cisco, is one of the sort of most foundational tech companies that we have. So I think things like that definitely are going to help. In terms of other things, you can always brush up by going to platforms like Coursera, Udemy, edX. You know, seeing what the in-demand skills are. A lot of the big universities, so Harvard, for example, offer online business courses where that is a global certification. And all that takes is your time and again the willingness to put in whatever work needs to be done to get that. So there are a lot of these. It's just more a matter of finding them and the ones that work for you. Because we all learn differently. So, just because one thing doesn't work for you doesn't mean the other thing is going to work for you. In terms of languages, obviously the whole world we think, sort of speaks English and most content is developed in English and content online, is English, but that is not the truth. Remember many years ago, one of the platforms, the CEO was talking about the fact that I think three-quarters of the content was created in English, but that was only created by one quarter of the content creators, which means that there was a massive amount of content in other languages not being created. And one of the big conversations I've had with companies over the years as AI continues to develop is the fact that we need to develop content, whether it's AI or anything online that is not in English. So look at, local South African languages. Look at Sotho, Swana, Zulu, whatever it is that you speak, because at the end of the day, these companies are starting to look at South Africa as the entry point into Africa, and they're going to need those languages because how do you connect with the culture, with the people, with the community if you don't speak to them in their language? So just because you don't see it now, it doesn't mean it won't exist in 6 months, in 3 months, in a year. You know, again, with a company like Amazon coming to South Africa, it opens the doors for so many others coming, and we've started to see the beginning of that. So look at developing, in your own language. I think it is really going to be a massive push forward as more companies start eyeing South Africa as that sort of entry point into the continent.
Mm, most definitely. And as we wrap up our conversation, Brendan, as we look into the future, what are some technologies or innovations that you believe will have the biggest impact on the future of work and the digital economy of South Africa?
You know, I hate to say it, but unfortunately, I do think it is going to be AI. But I think, if we look at it, it's not just AI in terms of how it's going to potentially take jobs, but I really think that there is a way we can use it to upskill ourselves. I think there's a way to use this technology to empower ourselves as well. But also, if you want to just take a step back, look at something like Uber, for example. I know we've seen a lot of regulation just change in the last few days now with Uber, but at least now we seem to have a clear way forward. And I know Uber, for example, is partnering with Harambee Youth Employment Accelerator, and what they're going to be doing is, offering partnership for people who are going to interviews, so getting free rides to interviews, which is, I think, a massive step forward. And then beyond that, also, helping people get access to the gig economy and able to get work on their platform. So, we talk about these big grand things like AI, but we don't even look at the things like, Uber Eats. I think there was just a stat the other day that Checker 6060 is now the biggest e-commerce platform in South Africa, making it even more valuable than Takealot. And that is just Checker 6060, not the rest of the ShopRite group at all. And if we see how that's exploding, it may not seem like the most glamorous thing, but it's a start. It's the way forward.
Mm,
I would not have ended up here if I hadn't started in contact centers because that's where I started. And
mm,
that taught me how to speak to people. And
mm,
speaking to people is what I tell people is really what my job is. You
mm,
know, so it's all of those things, and I think they are definitely ways forward. And I've spoken to a lot of other companies now who are working on some really exciting things that they want to be launching in the next few months, which I think again will be game changers. You're changing the influencer industry, changing the marketing industry, and these are all coming from South Africa, but working with global platforms like TikTok, like so many other companies. So I think start there. Look at the things around you. Look at the things that you admire. Understand why you admire them, and then sort of look at that. It doesn't have to be the AIs. It doesn't have to be the quantum computing. It can be things as simple as an Uber Eats, as a simple payments platform, as the grocery delivery for people in your neighborhood, elderly people who can't get to it and don't like the idea of a 60/60 or something like that. I think there's very simple ways, and you can use AI to say, listen, here's the problem. I have a few ideas. How would I go about this? Where do I start? So
mm.
that's when I say, AI as a game changer for industry and for business. That's the way we can use it instead of, oh no, AI is going to take my job.
Mm. Most definitely, Brendan. And I think I like in the conversation that you just had right now and the points that you made. I don't think it's also just about people that are looking for jobs, but even companies or businesses can start moving into the digital space because even
Yeah.
as companies, there are so many opportunities that you can do, online to grow your business and also create employment for the youth. For example, if you're looking at the example that you've just given us with Checkers 60, I mean, the fact that they took out motorbikes to be able to deliver, that's also a job employment of on its own.
Yeah.
So we are moving into the digital space, and I hope everybody that's watching right now can, try to integrate themselves and their businesses within that to grow themselves and also create a more employable economy for South Africa. But thank you so much, Brandon, for joining us and for sharing your valuable insight on such a very important topic. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you always for having me.
Thank you very much. Viewers at home, that was Brendon Petersen, who is our in house tech expert, and we were just talking about the future of work for South Africa's youth. And particularly, we're speaking about the digital economy and how one can, upskill themselves so that you can also be part of this growing economy. But on that note, viewers at home, it's time for us to head over to a quick break. We'll see you right after this.